Hello and welcome to our program Where God Weeps. Every day, over 6,000 people are dying from AIDS. And in Africa, over 28 million are infected with the HIV virus. Let's watch now a small documentary to give us a deeper insight into the situation of AIDS and Africa.
I thought that the life I had was the best. I used to love this kind of wild music. I used to go anywhere I wanted. The final blow that I got was the loss of my parents. That really made me feel like I needed to improve on my life.
I had lived in a dirty environment before. There are drunkards, there were kids who used to take drugs, and personally, I'd also taken some alcohol. I'd been influenced.
Youth around the globe are always hungry for knowledge. In Africa, outsmarting ignorance brings emancipation from poverty and the deadly clutches of HIV/AIDS. To stop the escalating epidemic, Sister Miriam Duggan, an Irish missionary, developed the Education for Life behaviour change programme. In 1994, Sister Duggan, along with a group of enthusiastic behaviour change programme participants, ventured into the slums surrounding Uganda's capital, Kampala, to offer the new generation a means out, thus creating Youth Alive.
We started by visiting the sick, taking care of them. They formed groups of young people, young men and women who helped the sick, washing their clothes, comforting them, speaking to them. As a pastor at that time, I also went to visit them together with Miriam Duggan, but that was not enough. So after some time, Sister Miriam Duggan thought of founding a youth group because she had collected with her a lot of young men and women. And so they formed the Youth Alive Club.
The Youth Alive really came out of a demand from the young people who had gone through the program and yet found that maybe they had made a commitment to delay having sex or not to get into drugs, but they found that the peer pressure was very strong and they came back and saying, we need more. It was to have ongoing formation of young people. The aim as well was to turn the negative peer pressure into positive peer pressure, that the young people themselves could be agents of change.
In the early years of the HIV epidemic, condoms were considered the levee that would stop the flood. Abstinence and infidelity were at best seen as weakness.
At that time, there was a lot of propagation of condoms. They said condoms, they said everything can help. Anything we handle our hands on. Let us try to use this, let us try to use that. We discouraged the condoms. We insisted on giving seminars, going to schools. During the holidays, we invited the students. They came to our parish hall and we taught them how to keep themselves alive.
Sister Miriam Duggan wanted to address the core and root causes of HIV/AIDS in order to help young people prevent themselves from HIV/AIDS. Was it just simply the sex, or was it because of poverty? Was it because young people lacked life skills, like young girls, to say no to favors from big men? So she wanted to address it from that point of view.
Uganda is Africa's success story when it comes to HIV/AIDS prevention. The prevalence of the epidemic has fallen from 30% to 6% over the last 15 years, largely due to the work of faith-based organizations like Youth Alive. The success naturally extends to the participants of the program. Caritas Carissimi was one of the founding members of Youth Alive. Today, she's a presenter at Uganda's most popular radio station.
If it is a youth talking to fellow youth, it's easier because we're at the same level. We kind of see eye to eye. We're involved in kind of the same circles. But if a grown-up who's had children, married and has children, they will listen, but it won't really register. We could just tell them things that you have gone through, the dangers of whatever it may be, whether it's sex at an early age or drinking or smoking, because you also live in that particular environment.
Caritas continues to be a positive role model for countless young people across her homeland, despite the pressures she at times faces at her commercial radio station. Adhering to one's Catholic faith is challenging in a society which increasingly advertises pleasure and consumption.
Everyone else around me will say, come on, live in the real world. It doesn't really work that way. But I've got to tell them it's got to work that way. You know, for future generation, that's how I'd preach it. If you preach abstinence, you would always find obstacles, major obstacles. Your bosses will bring you newspapers that have articles about condom use, articles about safe sex, you know. So you're bound. You've got to cater for that other percentage of people that, I mean, just because they don't go for abstinence, you're not going to force it down their throat. You're just going to make them see the light. Make sure you call us on 234-913.
I think there are many young, wonderful people in Uganda who believe in that process and believe that they want to hold on to the faith values they've inherited, and also their own traditional values, because in African tradition, virginity was a value.
Point of defense. Defense granted. Now, to defend myself about the natural methods, have you ever heard of these boys who tell their girls, let's have live sex, I will not, do they call it enter? Eh? Let's have live sex, I will not enter. Then the girls allow, and remember, we girls, sometimes, you know, you're overwhelmed and you can accept and have live sex, and this boy may be infected with the HIV virus and he passes it on to the girl.
Point of supplementary. Point of correction.
Across Africa, women, and particularly young girls, are seldom invited to openly discuss matters regarding their sexuality. The Youth Alive movement helps young people face and counteract the AIDS crisis within a positive peer environment. Activities include conducting seminars and awareness workshops on AIDS and HIV/AIDS prevention, counselling, and providing life skills programs to primary and secondary schools. Youth Alive favours abstinence for the unmarried and fidelity within marriage. Its members commit themselves to adopting this lifestyle in the name of their Catholic faith.
We all have a right to protect our lives and to protect the nation.
Point of defense. Thank you very much.
When they came, by that time I didn't know much about AIDS. But their workshop, their conference with us, it was about 1 week. When that week ended, I realized there's a lot I didn't know. They told us some facts about AIDS. They told us how you can prevent it, how you can help other people. You're not supposed to desert them. And when they left, we formed a club at our school, and we used to meet like once in a week.
When you ask young people, a lot of them do not like the way civil servants and public servants do their work. They don't like the way the police does their work. So we're telling them who's going to change that. This generation can change that.
I want to be a doctor, but a part-time counselor, that I can also help other young people by advising them about things in life.
In the several interactions I've had with Youth Alive, the most amazing thing is the testimonies of the young people. A young boy from Zambia who stood up and said, Madam Minister, for us, the young people, after the interactions with Youth Alive, we are going to be the generation which will be free of corruption. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, the honesty the values that Youth Alive has instilled in us are going to make us grow up in a generation which is going to be upright, and we are going to be corruption-free. I was amazed and thrilled and inspired.
The debate on whether abstinence and fidelity are effective may continue in the media and in policy rooms around the world. Thanks to the ongoing support of Catholic organisations, in Uganda and across Africa, the winner of the debate is Youth Alive. Following its success in Uganda, the movement also operates in Kenya and the Sudan.
We support Youth Alive as well as the Behaviour Change programme. They complement each other very well, and we give aid whenever we are solicited. I would say that here again our calling, as aid to the Church in need, is renewed. The calling to be sensitive to what is irrevocably at the heart of reality, but remains unamplified by the media. We must be sensitive and uncover this truth so that we can reference and promote it, because in this truth lies the future of the African continent, which, despite its scars, knows that the family is the lifeline and essence of humanity.
The fact is that these children are growing up with the values, because some of them were able to interact with Youth Alive and they bring this back home. These are the success stories I live with, which I see, and I believe these are going to be the children who are going to make a big contribution tomorrow.
United, free for liberty, together we'll always stand.
Well, it's a very lively club. It helps you to learn so many things. They've helped us to learn about AIDS. They help us to learn how to abstain and how to be compassionate to other people. So it's really a nice club.
Youth Alive has taught me many things. That I can lead my life through the right acts and the right means. So, and also God is there to protect me and guide me as I go on.
Youth arise to build a nation, united stand, we fight as one. Serve and lead to be an example, the leaders of tomorrow. Arise, 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 get up and lead a healthy life. Youth alive forever.
To tell us more about the situation of AIDS in Africa and the response of the Catholic Church in this regard, it's my pleasure to welcome Sister Miriam Duggan, working with the Education for Life program in Africa. Sister Miriam Duggan, thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you, Mark.
Sister Miriam, what prompted you to go first to Africa? You've been living there now 34 years. What was the first inspiration for you to go there?
I suppose as I grew up, I was very aware of, through some of the church programs in my own hometown of Limerick in Ireland, of the needs in Africa, and I had a longing to maybe one day go there. And so, having done a bit of research, I found a congregation called the Franciscan Missionary Sisters for Africa, where the sisters, all their work was in Africa. So I went and joined them and became a Franciscan sister.
Now, you're a medical doctor. You trained with the Franciscan Sisters as a medical doctor, and you went to Africa as a doctor. What spurred you to enter the field of sexual education and particularly AIDS?
Well, I was working as an obstetrician gynecologist in the big hospital in Kampala, which we ran, and then the AIDS pandemic really came upon us very quickly in 1987, and we were just getting so many people into the hospital with AIDS, we couldn't cope any longer. So and at the time I was also medical superintendent, so in order to cope we set up a home-based care program where we would go out into the town, into the homes of people and care for them there, because AIDS is a chronic sickness, to alleviate the beds in the hospital. And then seeing the pain and the suffering of so many people out there, the whole vastness of what and destruction of what AIDS was doing to families spurred me on to say, look, this is a preventable disease and we must try and prevent it.
Did people know at the time what it was? What What was affecting so many people, and why did people understand the disease at the beginning?
No, even for myself in the beginning, we were coming out of 17 years of political upheaval and war, and I suppose we were too busy surviving. And you just read in a journal about AIDS among homosexuals in California, but you never felt it had anything to do with you. And I remember when we first got testing, and that was probably 1989, when we did our first ELISA test, we found out already that in our midst there were 13% of the population around Kampala were positive, people, young women coming to the antenatal clinic, and that really kind of frightened us. And it was the people in Uganda themselves who began to talk about a disease called SLIM, and it happened up near the Rakai border, where on the borders between Uganda and Tanzania. And at that time during the war, some Ugandan soldiers went across into Tanzania and plundered, and it became known. And months later, it was noticed in that area people were getting very thin, losing weight, going down sick and dying, and it became known as the Tanzanian bewitching disease, or as SLIM, and that was what the local people put on it before we medics caught up with what was really going on.
Education for Life is a behavior change program. What is the intent? What was the basis for this project?
The basis for this project was that the belief that we needed to address the root causes for the spread of AIDS. So that program has three sort of stages. The first is looking at the reality on the ground. What's the fertile soil that AIDS is finding? And so instead of going into, it's run as a workshop, and instead of going into a group and saying to them, you need to change your behaviour, whereas bristles will go straight go up, you help them to discover where they're putting their life at risk, if they are, and then offer them alternatives.
How does this happen?
It happens through giving them questions that they will discuss in small groups and then bring their findings back to a larger group, and you facilitate further discussion. First of all, you might give, for early stage, to open up people, you would give questions like what peer pressure is put on you and by whom. So they would discuss what the pressures were. And so many of them would be, I'm pressurized to start taking drugs, or I'm pressurized to have sex, or I'm pressurized to steal, or whatever. And then you would look at what are the values that make me do the things I do, and you would dissect out the good values or the negative values, or the values that give life. And then you would focus on to questions more around relationships. What if a young girl says no to sex? What will happen to her? Or what if a man is unfaithful in his family? Or what if somebody what happens at drinking parties? So you would, and many of these questions you would do around, get them to do them in role plays. And you'd have good fun doing them. But it would also bring out a lot of the things that really do happen.
Why role-playing? Role-playing has a manner of bringing out the stories.
Yeah, and in the African context, people love to act. And it also brings out much more than people are often prepared to talk about. Like, to give you an example, you might give a question like, what happens at nightclubs? And the role play will come back and show you everything that happens at nightclubs, the conning, the spiking of drinks, the promiscuity, the taking of alcohol, maybe the fights that result. So it also lightens the program. You have a bit of fun in acting it out. But then you sit the group down and say, well, what did you really see? What was positive in what you saw, or what was negative? And so you get them debating around these things. So eventually you're trying to get them to see where they need to make responsible choices if they are to survive where AIDS is prevalent.
You must see textbook answers coming back. For example, I don't know, if you ask a boy why he would become sexually active, it would be to become a man. Do you see this, and what would be the most prevalent answers that you get back for sexual activity?
The most common answer you get back for sexual is peer pressure, actually, amazingly. It wasn't to become a man, but sometimes, occasionally that would come in, but the strongest thing was peer pressure. And that's why afterwards we began to do a lot of work around peer pressure in order to turn the negative peer pressure into positive peer pressure, why you couldn't be more a man by being able to say no and stand, even if it meant standing alone. and how to withstand a lot of peer pressure and to make your own informed choices.
Now, in the adult community, prostitution might be given as one reason, and we would consider, I suppose, as a prevalent means through which AIDS is spread. Do you also see this among children?
Yeah, I've worked a lot myself with prostitutes, and a lot of them would be young girls who've made their way to the city and get into prostitution, and it's often survival in Africa. It's not that young people will be there, and I would always say, well, rather than give them condoms, say, to me, it's a kind of a form of slavery. I think as a Christian woman, you need to reach out to them and lift them out of that gutter and offer them an alternative. So when working with young women who are in prostitution like that, you would dialogue with them and do the same program, but maybe a little bit more gently. And then saying, what is the alternative? Can we offer you an alternative rather than to continue living on the streets or in that way? And so many times it would be setting them up in small income generating projects as a means of supporting themselves or maybe the child they have, or for the other maybe younger ones, getting them back into some education program, giving them a skill where they can, many of those skills might be going along doing hairdressing or doing a catering course or something.
What ages would we be talking about here?
The ages would vary very much, but for maybe the prostitution that I would be aware of would be maybe from the age of 15 years upwards. But it's that kind of second stage. There's no point saying to somebody, don't have sex if that's the way they're going to get their money. You have to say, well, look, this is an alternative to how you can get money. Just maybe to give you an example, I had given one of these programs in a parish, and when I got home one evening, 2 young people in the parish who had done the program had collected 16 young girls who were in prostitution as a way of survival, and they said, Sister, can you help these young girls? So we made a bargain with them. We eventually ended up as 24. We said, okay, they were doing it. They were living together in the one house, and every night a knock came on the door, and one by one they went out. And why did you go out with men? And it was a plate of food. It was survival. So we said, okay, we'll give you 3 plates of food for the day, every day, if you will come and attend the program. So we did a whole program on self-esteem and self-worth, and then followed it on behaviour change, and then sat with each one of them and said, okay, how can we have an alternative income for you?
So a key to the Education for Life program is not just giving the guidance and saying you shouldn't do this and this and this, but also to provide the answers to the day-to-day problems.
Yes, and it depends. Like if you're working with groups like that, it's often setting them up in income generating projects or getting them back into some skills so they can get a job. If you're working with people at school, it may be helping them to resist peer pressure and all the rest, and to let them be proud of themselves to say, I'm a virgin or I'm abstaining.
What do you see as the future for this project?
I would hope that it would spread into many others. That what I have learned myself is that just giving people statistics or awareness that AIDS is there is not enough. We need to go deeper. We need to give them a process by which they can work through and find a solution and find where they need to make responsible choices.
Sister Miriam, thank you for having been with us, and we continue to pray for you and your project, the Education for Life. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today. And if you want to know more about the Education for Life program, or perhaps how you might be able to help, I would encourage you to look at the contact information at the end of this program. And I look forward to seeing you next time on our program, Where God Weeps.